It is the fate of some questions to go unanswered throughout the ages, but even these unresolved issues can become neglected when enough time passes. Coming up, Poseidon's ancient city, European mummies, lost civilizations, and more. Join us as we explore some of the most overlooked mysteries in history. The city of Helike. Now, when you worship the god of the sea, you might do well to fear his wrath if you make him angry. A Greek writer described an amazing city called Helike that worshipped the Poseidon and was a bustling metropolis of trade, commerce, and religion. That was until it was destroyed. 4,500 years before the detailed writing, this apparent capital city was demolished by a tremendous earthquake. This would have left a ruin for archaeologists to find. If a tsunami hadn't washed the remains of the city back to its supposed god, some high priest must have really screwed up. The city went unmentioned outside of these ancient Greek writings. That was until 1861, when a bronze coin with Poseidon's head was found in a nearby cave. Then in 2001, two intrepid archaeologists were able to locate the ruin by digging deeply through gravel and mud on the coast of Greece. Now, naturally, these reports are confusing due to the passages of time, but we're presently trying to reassemble what some are calling the true Atlantis. The Carnac Stones. Stonehenge is a famous and long-standing architectural and historical mystery, but it's not alone in its category. The Carnac Stones are lesser known, but equally confusing as a phenomenon. 3,000 giant monoliths are arranged in perfect straight lines over 12 kilometers in northwestern France. Some stories depict the stones as soldiers in a lost Roman legion, turned to rock by Merlin the wizard. Modern science, however, is working under the assumption that this elaborate display might be a giant ancient earthquake detector. Whatever the stones are, no one really knows who built them or why. The fall of the Minoans. The legend of Theseus and the Minotaur in the labyrinth is a wonderful tale, but it raises some unanswered historical questions. On the island of Crete, where this wonderful civilization did in fact prosper, despite the story of a bull-headed demigod, there lie the ruins of an ancient civilization whose extinction is still a mystery. Granted, the fall of Rome around the same time occupies many more of our historical records, and the Roman Empire was an astounding cultural era. The Minoans were very close to as interesting in their development and scope. A wonderful array of cities and cultures with colorful religions. To say the least, it's a wonder that we haven't devoted more time to understanding their demise. A neighboring landmass, Thera Island, was devastated by an enormous volcanic eruption. But archaeological records actually show tablets throughout Minoa that were created 50 years after the natural disaster. Theories vary as far as what actually ended this incredible civilization, but it's possible that the amount of ash from the Thera eruption weakened the crops for years, allowing the Greeks to finally take over Crete and end this almost mythical age. The Tarim mummies. Finding well-preserved bodies is always an interesting day in the life of an archaeologist, but some of these graves provide more questions than they do answers. In the Tarim Basin of western China, a team on a dig discovered 2,000-year-old mummies in the early 1990s. Mummies in China would be odd enough in and of themselves, but these embalmed corpses were blonde-haired and had long noses. A DNA test would show that these bodies were in fact of European descent. While recently discovered, Chinese texts from 1000 BC talk about Far East dwellings of Caucasians. No one really knows exactly how these people got to where they did. Easter Island. There are many obvious mysteries about Easter Island, and almost all of them are centered around the giant iconic heads that litter the landscape. But these photogenic monuments take away from one of the more deeper and subtle mysteries. Rongorongo predates the statues and is a manuscript that describes a language of possibly the first inhabitants of the island. This is a language that happens to be unlike any of the nearby oceanic dialects and is unique in the fact that it was written down. All of the nearby native civilizations relied on oral tradition and lore to pass on their culture and history. Unfortunately, shortly after the discovery of Rongo-Rongo in the 1700s, the language would be banned by European explorers because of the pagan ties that it had with the inhabitants of the island. It's estimated that we've lost so much of the information about this mysterious hieroglyphic history that we may never know what it says or who actually created it. Bog bodies. The preservation power of tar pits allows us to take a deeper look at ancient creatures like the woolly mammoth. However, when it comes to humans, things do get a little bit more strange. The marshes and wetlands of northern Europe are home to a number of interesting boggy landscapes, but as a traveler, you might be inclined not to dig too deeply. Hundreds of bodies have been found throughout the swamplands, some of them dating back thousands of years. The bog preserves these corpses remarkably well, and scientists can discover much about the past lives of the muddy inhabitants. The oldest known bog body is from 8,000 years ago, and the oldest with flesh comes from 2,000 years ago. The marsh preserves the organs and skin so that scientists can figure out how the people lived, and eventually how they died. Marks of medieval torture are commonly seen throughout the graves, and while almost 2,000 bodies have been found, most cannot be dated or properly analyzed. They just happen to be a deep assortment of people over thousands of years who've been sunk into the murk. While this is an interesting mystery, it might not make you want to take a picnic in these wetlands. Jack the Ripper. Some crimes go on so long without ever being solved that the cold case just gets buried in decades. Over 100 years, various historians, crime writers, and detectives have been trying to solve the identity of the man known as Jack the Ripper. This Victorian-era serial killer has turned into a monster of folklore and myth. But he was an actual man, and he did actually go on a brutal killing spree in 1888. Now, there are claims of DNA evidence left on a victim's shawl that point that Jack was a Polish immigrant. Another claims that he was a deranged surgeon trying to protect the royal family. But at the heart of it all, Jack the Ripper was a violent murderer, and it's likely that his fame comes from his elusiveness. If this overlooked mystery were solved, it's possible that Jack would step out of fiction and into the harsh realm of Victorian England as merely a psychotic killer. But it's actually more likely that his criminal ID will never be shown. Mary Celeste. There are many mysterious disappearances that take place in the vast realm of the sea, and in 1872, an American merchant ship by the name of the Mary Celeste would depart from New York for Genoa on November the 7th. Then a Canadian ship would find her off the coast of some islands, completely adrift. The Mary Celeste was still seaworthy, though it was disheveled by storms, and it also had a missing lifeboat. The supplies on board were almost entirely intact, and even the crew's belongings were in their cabins undisturbed. There was also no trace of the captain, his family, or the crew, and they were never heard from or seen again. Many prominent figures at the time would propose ideas as to the bizarre abandonment of the ship, including the creator of Sherlock Holmes, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Foul play and pirates are partially suspected, though no belongings were taken, and the cargo was left untouched. Theories also include a freak waterspout in the ocean, or a seaquake. Whatever caused the ship to be abandoned with all of its belongings and sailing on with food and water remains unknown, and continues to be a mystery for the ages. It's no wonder that the Mary Celeste is considered to be the original ghost ship. The Devil's Footprints. Some historical mysteries lead in a direction that few want to follow. On the early morning of February 9, 1855, townsfolk in southern Devon came across a set of footprints that chilled their hearts, and also raised some pretty severe questions. A single straight line of footprints looked as if it had been branded in the deep snow with a hot iron. This would be weird enough on its own, but these were hoof-shaped and cloven. This biblical mystery would get the attention of the Times and Illustrated London News, as 40 miles on either side of the country were covered in these demonic footsteps. While people would hastily put forward ideas like a deranged badger, an escaped kangaroo, and even a balloon with a horseshoe attached to it, no one was really convincing, and they tiptoed around the obvious, terrifying possibility. The Illustrated News would point out that covering 40 miles in a night was impossible for any normal creature, and that no known animal walks in that straight of a line, not even a man. The Voynich Manuscript. Just because something is an unknown mystery for the ages doesn't mean that it can't be beautiful. The Voynich Manuscript is what remains of a large, elaborate book that dates back to the early 1400s. But what makes this article so unique is that it's in a language that no one has ever seen before, and no one knows what the book is all about. The manuscript has about 240 pages and is named for Wilfrid Voynich, a Polish book dealer who purchased the mysterious item in 1912. The manuscript has pictures and diagrams of herbs and medicines and is believed to be an early pharmaceutical aid, but no one can really be sure. It also exists in several parts and is vividly illuminated on its vellum background, so it's a shame that no one can actually read it. This baffling but beautiful literary creation stands in a category of its own and will surely confuse more scholars before its contents are revealed, if they are ever revealed. Indus Valley. The collapse of the Mayan metropolis was impressive and well studied, as the society crumbled due largely to disease brought on by conquistadors. It's odd, then, that a similar ruined civilization in India should receive so little attention, considering its size, along with the mystery of its decline. The Indus Valley people are India's oldest known civilization and had cultivated land and cities spanning from western India to Afghanistan. There would be an estimated 5 million people in the city and had sophisticated sanitary systems, including drainage aqueducts and ornate baths. While we seem to know a fair bit about their cleanliness, no one really knows where they went or why. There's no record of any armies, slaves, or attacks, and to this day, archaeologists are baffled as the vast and cultured population of the Indus Valley seems to have simply walked away from their advanced Bronze Age lives. This has been a look at the most overlooked mysteries in history. Which baffling ancient secret did you find most compelling? And what odd historical fact did we miss? Let us know in the comments below, and subscribe while you're here for more like them in the future. Thanks for watching. Now, crop circles apparently appear every week somewhere around the world, and they come in some of the most unique sizes and patterns that can be visible from Google Earth satellite, which usually ends up sparking a huge debate around aliens and other paranormal activity.